And here's a headline. You may agree, you may, of course, emphatically disagree with it. This is the headline. Outrage as eco-zealots have their jail terms slashed and Just Stop Oil leader set to be released soon. The decision by appeal judges to slash jail terms handed down to eco-zealots risks sending a dangerous message to other activists, Tories warned last night. The party's justice spokesman Robert Jenrick blasted the reduction in sentences for 6 protesters involved in disruptive motorway climate demonstrations. One of the activists handed a shorter term by the Court of Appeal was Just Stop Oil co-founder Roger Hallam. As a result of yesterday's ruling by the Lady Chief Justice Baroness Carr, Mr Justice Lavender and Mr Justice Griffiths, Hallam, jailed in 2024 for 5 years for agreeing to disrupt traffic by having protesters climb onto gantries over the M25, had his sentence reduced to 4 years. It's likely to mean that he's going to be released imminently. Daniel Shaw, Louise Lancaster and all the others who originally received 4-year jail terms for their involvement in the same protest. Shaw and Lancaster's sentences were reduced to 3 years. The other lot were reduced to 30 months. And somebody else who was previously jailed for 20 months for her role in an M25 protest had her sentence reduced to 18 months. Robert Jenrick is up in arms. He says it's disappointing that these radical disruptors have had their sentences reduced. This judgment undermines deterrence and risks sending a dangerous message. When in government, the Conservatives took tough action to ensure that professional agitators like Just Stop Oil faced the full force of the law for their actions and answered for the damage they did in our country. And I wonder whether you agree. Are you outraged to see those sentences cut, or do you think they were ridiculously overwrought in the first place? Too long, too dramatic, that they were inappropriate for the sin or crime committed? 0345 6060 973. When, for example, you hear the story today of that protester who has shinned up Elizabeth Tower with the Palestinian flag between his hands, and we know now that ambulances are on duty to come and try and get him down, and rescue workers are busily climbing the biggest cranes to try to entice him to come down, and roads have been closed all around the vicinity of Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace Road completely shut down for hours and hours on end. People not making a living, people disrupted on this beautiful sunny day from getting to do what they want to do. Do you think good on him? How tremendous. Isn't he right? And doesn't he have the right to protest in the way that he is? He's very peaceful. He's just sitting up there with no shoes on, holding a flag. What could be finer? One of the commentators we heard earlier said, what a beautiful protest. Or do you think this is the kind of thing that should be nipped in the bud, and he needs a decent prison sentence for costing all this money, causing all this disruption? How do you feel? It really depends on you, your background, your life experience, whether you've been stuck in one of those Just Stop Oil protests and you were fuming, whether you were stuck in it but you thought it was a good idea and you didn't mind because you felt that what they had to say was so extremely important. 0345 6060 973. Doesn't matter who you are or what you do or what you're doing this afternoon, you will have a view on this. Would you have liked to see those Just Stop Oil protesters serve out their full sentence in prison, or do you think it's right that they should be cut shorter because really they were peaceful? It was a protest. We're allowed to protest peacefully in this country. How do you feel about it? Let's discuss this with Lord Walney. His name's John, independent peer and former advisor on political violence and disruption to the UK government. Lord Walney, thank you so much for joining me. Good to see you on the programme. Outrage as eco-zealots have their jail term slashed. Is that how you feel?
I think actually that the picture is a little different to to the interpretation that Robert Jenrick has given, because if you look at the reaction of Just Stop Oil and the extreme protesters themselves, they are dismayed by the outcome of this appeal. They were putting a great deal of store behind it, and actually what happened yesterday was that the sentences of 16 eco-protesters who had been sentenced to jail terms were subject to this mass appeal. 10 of those had their appeals completely rejected. And yes, although 6, including Roger Hallam, had a sentence reduced, 4 years for a crime like this, in my perspective, is still quite a substantial jail term. So I think we have to be careful about how we talk about this, and actually what I wouldn't want is the impression going out that actually now people are getting away with this, because in fact the other very important principle that was upheld by the Court of Appeal yesterday was the idea that that breaking the law is breaking the law, and there isn't a get out if you feel that you're a conscientious objector and you just feel so strongly about an issue that it's therefore okay to commit criminal acts. That was thrown out by the Court of Appeal, and that is a very important message to send to these.
But why were the sentences made shorter? Why could they not just survive as is? What was gained by that? Because we know about justice being done and justice being seen to be done. So what does this convey to members of the public who hear this, that it's really not that serious, less serious than we thought it was? What's the message? What's the point of it?
The initial sentences that were given over were really substantial, and the initial judge took into account the fact that many of them were repeat protesters, that the act that they were conspiring to commit in terms of shutting down, I think, the M25 was very serious, and they were handed strikingly punitive jail terms because of that. Now, I think if you'd had a situation where the appeals had been successful and those jail terms had been quashed, then yeah, I would share the real alarm that others have been expressing, because the review that I put to government earlier this year said very strongly that these need to be seen as criminal acts. I think on this occasion, actually, you just look at how unhappy these extreme groups are. They're dismayed by this ruling, and that's because, in the main, they have failed to achieve their objective. And
talk to me, if you will. I mean, obviously, I didn't warn you, wasn't able to warn you that I was going to ask you this, but about this man who has climbed up the Elizabeth Tower and has been up there for hours and is barefoot and is holding a Palestinian flag and shouting about Gaza, and he's doing this for the people of Gaza. I mean, what about his right to do something like that? You have to think, what about the rights of the rescue workers who are going to have to risk their lives to get him down? What about the ambulance workers who've got to take a perfectly important functioning ambulance out of circulation to sit there in case he falls off? And you've got to think about all the people who are trying to make a living driving around London or just having a lovely time in the sunshine and can't because of this. What do you think about it?
People do not have the right to break the law because they decide that they feel strongly about something. And actually, that is a statement of the law in of itself, but also it very strongly accords with where the vast majority of the public are. I did a considerable amount of polling of public opinion for the review that I have submitted to government, and significant majorities of people absolutely respect people's right to protest. It's clear that is ground into our identity as a nation, the right to object to whatever it is you feel strongly about. But incredibly strong majorities do not feel it's acceptable to inconvenience the public in the manner that this man has done. So many people, as you say, will have their days extremely inconvenienced. There will be emergency workers who have to put themselves at risk to try to get him down. And then critically, you've got St Thomas's over the road, and if ambulances are being blocked, that is putting lives at risk. And it really symbolises the arrogance and the selfishness of many of these extreme protesters, in the way that they feel that because they feel so strongly about this, they can ride roughshod over the public in what they do.
I mean, that really is. I mean, I've interviewed so very many of them, and many of them, charming people and delightful individuals, but they definitely do feel that they have a deeper understanding, a kind of activated empathy, a kind of heightened awareness of the dangers of, for example, climate change or oil or, I don't know, Gaza or whatever it is, and that they have a kind of messianic duty to point it out to everybody else else to kind of, rise and arouse in people the same kind of fervour that they feel. And they feel that their desire to show everybody else how important what they feel is overrides the other person's right to go to their father's funeral, attend their own wedding, go to a job interview, drive safely on a road, or any other thing. And they really do think that when you sit next to them and talk to them about it, that is what they think. They think they are right. They overrule and they override. They do
exactly. And you know what? When you any extremist in history, any terrorist, and thankfully we do not have the kind of eco-terrorism in this country that is occasionally seen at the moment in other countries. But every extremist and terrorist in history thinks that they are on the side of righteousness, that they are the good guys, that their cause is so important that it justifies the sometimes unspeakable acts which they commit in the name of that cause. And it's a really dangerous way to think. There are rights and wrongs, and we can debate. And I'm one of the people actually who think that the government does need to go, and the world needs to go much further and faster in terms of tackling climate change. But we live in a democracy, and we have so many different channels in which we can get our view across. And ultimately, the reason that we haven't moved far enough yet is that we haven't created enough of a majority consensus of opinion to move faster. And actually, what these extreme protesters feel is that they can short circuit that. They don't feel they need to get a majority of the public. Actually, if you hold the public and public life to ransom by making things so disruptive that governments go, do you know what? I'm done with this. Have what you want. Stop menacing us. They'll get where they want faster. And that is wrong. It's dangerous. And if you allow it, if you think it's okay for one cause that you happen to believe in, it doesn't actually make sense. You have no, you have no standing then to say for other causes, extreme causes that you don't believe in, that they can't do it. Because why couldn't they do it as well?
When this guy comes down, or when they finally fetch him down from the Elizabeth Tower, will he be arrested immediately? Should he be? Will he be?
Yeah, I hope so. Absolutely. I mean, it's criminal trespass, and it's putting people lives at risk. And just because he happens to be holding a flag, whether you believe in that or not, I mean, I'd hope that we could have a greater consensus in this country that whatever our views on a particular issue, then we actually go through the legitimate grounds to, make
We'll see whether the lovely LBC listener agrees with you, Lord Walney, or not. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And let's go to Jessie, first-time caller from Kent. Hello, Jessie. Thanks for ringing.
I'm just ringing in because I'm a friend of Cressida Gethin. We've actually just been to visit her. There's three of us here on the platform at Headcorn Station. And we've just been to HMP Sutton Park to visit Cressy.
Oh, right. I'm so glad you called, Jessica. All right. Now, tell Jessie, tell me a bit about exactly what she did so that people who can't place her and just can vaguely remember the name, you can remind us what she's in prison for.
Cressy's been sent to prison for attending a Zoom call where they were planning a non-violent protest on a motorway. And she got sentenced originally to 4 years in prison, and she's just had it repealed. And to be honest, it's absolutely insane that she has had that prison sentence in the first place. Because when you think about what she's actually done, a non-violent protest, the suffragette is International Women's Day today, and we remember the contribution to our democracy that the suffragettes made. They slashed paintings, they burned down buildings, and we memorialise them as, these we hold them up as this being
heroines, absolutely heroines.
As heroines,
social
exactly.
crusaders. Of course
and not many people know that actually no suffragette served longer than a 6-month prison sentence. That was the longest prison sentence they served. So it's actually clear to see that the repression that protesters face and that ordinary people face for demonstrating for what they believe in, like the climate crisis, like Palestine, things that should be
But did you hear? But did you hear Lord Walney speaking on the show? What he said was that in terms of the law, just because you implicitly and with your whole heart, your passion, your soul, you believe in a cause, it doesn't mean that you're entitled to break the law. It doesn't matter how passionately you espouse it, how wrong you think everyone else is to ignore it, how stupid and deluded and ridiculous everyone else is, and how it's your job to wake them up and you need to make them notice, and they're just leading their dull lives, and you need to agitate them and shake them and stop them driving up the M25. That's against the law. Therefore, the law must be imposed.
But what I felt was so inaccurate and so just awful about what Lord Walney said was that he said extremists and terrorists, and that's how he talked about people like Cressy. Cressy is an ordinary young woman in the middle of her music degree who's decided to take action against the climate crisis, not because she personally feels really passionate about it, not because she's, really, really into, this is something that is going to affect everyone, and it's going to lead to the deaths of billions of people. And that is the fact. And it's not because, the idea that she is extraordinary or, some sort of strange, person that's decided to do something radically different and dangerous is just completely inaccurate.
I believe is it true that she missed her brother's wedding because she was in prison?
I think that is true.
What kind of spirits was she in today when you saw her, and what's she thinking about her sentence being shortened?
She's feeling mixed things, because something else that people probably don't know, listeners, it's really important to humanise these people. The way Lord Walney talked about just before then, the way that you're talking about it in general is extremely dehumanising. But to humanise Cressy, she's about to come out on tag, and she's going to come out to extremely restrictive licensing conditions. And actually, 73% of people that come out of prison get recalled based on breaking licensing conditions, and only 23% of those are actually because they've done anything to break
Can I ask, when you say very restrictive licensing conditions, I don't know what that is. What do you mean?
So licensing conditions are the conditions that mean that she gets early release. So she's obviously her sentence is 2 years, but she's getting released now.
Good.
And she'll be released on a tag. Right. And then her licensing conditions will be, for example, that people, Just Stop Oil protesters that are coming out of prison are getting conditions that mean that they can't speak to their partners, that they can't speak to their friends.
Why can't you speak to how can you not be able to speak to your partner? Why?
Because what they've been convicted for, which is actually a new offence that was introduced by the new Public Order Act, is this conspiracy to basically plan a protest.
Right.
And that's a conspiracy to plan a non-violent protest. So it's actually engaging in planning a non-violent protest can mean that you're put in prison, and then even when you're released, you're severed from your community. You're not allowed to talk to your partner if there's any chance that you could potentially engage in planning a non-violent protest again. I mean, it's unspeakably dystopian. This is like 1984 stuff.
Jessie, amazing call. I'm really glad you phoned. Thank you very much indeed. You certainly have humanised the discussion in a very vivid way. I appreciate the call. Let's talk to Sue in Lancaster about this. Hello, Sue. Thanks for ringing. Hi.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi. How do you feel about it? I don't know if it's confected anger. I'm not sure.
I think I feel angry that people like Lord Walney are paid by the fossil fuel companies and the arms trade and allowed to influence laws in our country. I thought democracy meant ordinary people, not, lobbyists setting our laws.
Well, is he setting laws? He's only provided the government with the paper looking into it. He's not setting the law or imposing anything on anyone, is he? The law is the law, and the law was broken by the protest that occurred, wasn't it?
The protesters' sentences went up straight after that report was published, and he was portrayed as an independent advisor to the government. He was supposed to be in position for 6 months, and he's only just, on February the 14th, been sacked. We're glad he's sacked, obviously, because that must mean that surely government will start to act in the interest of ordinary people now. And
so I'm very interested, Sue, and I'm not saying this in any kind of preemptive way, but when you say act in the interest of ordinary people, what do you in the way that you see this think that is? What are the interests of ordinary people, do you think?
I think the interests of ordinary people are to protect us. We've gone past 1.5 degrees. Mm-hmm. That's gone. That was supposed to be the safe limit, and we're on a trajectory to get to 3%. Now, 3% heating means that billions of people are going to die. And the government just don't seem to be getting on with the job. If they were getting on with the job rather than taking money from fossil fuel bribes, then we would be able to have confidence in them and wouldn't need to protest. But all we get is clowns, like we've just heard, fighting amongst themselves. And it's as though they have no interest in ordinary people. They're just in terms of putting themselves further and further up the career ladder.
It's just so interesting when you say ordinary people, you see, because lots of people, when they hear of eco-protesters and they think of it and they think of the ordinary people in that scenario, they think of the people who were just driving down the M25 that day and they were just going to a job interview, or they were just going into town to buy a present for their mum, or they were just going to work, or they were, just people leading their lives, the ordinary people that we sort of imagine that you're talking about, and their lives are put on hold and they're completely interrupted because other people have decided that what they think is more important than the law, more important than everyone else's lives, and they will now impose their feelings, thoughts, worries and everything else on these ordinary people. So it's very interesting that your perspective is that the ordinary people are the protesters, not those protested against, you might say.
Absolutely, because the ordinary people aren't receiving millions of pounds in handouts from the fossil fuel industry. The ordinary people are people like me who don't want to be held up, but they do expect those people in Parliament to be acting in their best interest. I expect that when I go to work, that those MPs are acting for me. I don't expect those MPs to be taking handouts from fossil fuel companies.
What sort of handout? What do you mean? I mean, average MPs, what kind of handouts do you think they're getting from fossil fuel companies? I mean, just your ordinary MP just going about their business at a local surgery. Do you think they're in receipt of money from fossil fuel companies, or do they just drive a car and get ride a bike like everybody else? I mean, I don't think there's any proof that anybody, any ordinary MPs or the great majority or a small minority are getting some kind of backsheesh from fossil fuel companies, is there? I mean, you're saying it, but it isn't true, is it?
Yeah, there is. There's a revolving door. And the moment an MP packs in or is fired or doesn't get elected, a door opens to him into a lobbying job.
Well, that's not a bribe. That's a lobbying job. But that's not a bribe. That's not against the law to become a lobbyist.
That's not against the law to be able to walk out of a job that you've not been elected because you've failed to get elected.
Well, you don't walk out. If you're not elected, then you don't walk out. You can't do the job because you weren't elected to do it, so you don't walk out of it. And if you fail to win your seat back or win a seat as an MP, and then you take a legal job as a lobbyist, there's nothing illegal. That's not bribery. What do you bribing? No, I don't. What are you bribing someone to do?
To pay. You're paying to get laws that you want. You're paying to have changes in legislation. You're paying to ensure that your
why do you think that lobbyists are more insidious or more sinister or more something or other than protesters are? What's the difference? They're both trying to enforce on other people who would quite like to ignore it, a particular view or a particular cause, aren't they? What's the difference? Aren't they both ends of the same spectrum, trying to do exactly the same thing, really?
Yeah, we talked about ordinary people, and a lobbyist has a lot more power, a lot more influence, and a lot more money.
Well, what percentage of MPs go on to become lobbyists anyway? Really, so your view, Sue, is that the sentences should be shorter or commuted altogether because these people are doing something incredibly important on behalf of everyone else. Is that what you think?
I believe that our politicians should be acting in our best interest, and I don't believe they are.
Appreciate the call. Have you ever been part of a
billionaires?
Have you ever been on a Just Stop Oil protest yourself? Have you?
If I can just finish, I believe that they're acting in the interest of the billionaires, and I believe that we need to from them, because I don't think for a moment that they're acting in our interest. If they were, then they could just tax the rich 2%, and that would pave to get us to net zero by 2030. And that's what I'd like to see. And until I see our government taking emergency action to get us there, then I fully support protest, and I fully support anything that will make us wake up and get our politicians to act on our behalf rather than those
I'm
really
just
rich
checking
people
whether you've actually been on any protests yourself. Are you also a protester?
I was on a protest this morning. I was in Lancaster Town Centre and I was speaking for Women's Day for those women in Palestine who've lost their lives. So, yeah, I will use my voice and I will speak. But I don't have the power and influence of the fossil fuel companies. And those fossil fuel companies knew what was happening to the climate 50 years ago and decided to hide that and try and get us to blame each other. And they've sustained money and power into lobbyists and put that through government. Lord Walney is a paid fossil fuel lobbyist. And
I'm not sure that. I don't know if that's true. Lord Walney's a paid fossil fuel lobbyist. We'll have a look.
Yes,
we'll have a look and
is.
see if we can confirm it.
Absolutely
If it's true, then we'll certainly say so, Sue. Sue, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Adrian in Perth. Hello, Adrian. Hi.
Hello. Hi, Vanessa.
Hello.
Really enjoying the show.
Good. I'm glad. It's quite spirited, I must say. Quite sparky.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to go back to last August, when the trial was taking place for the 5 people that have now had their sentences.
I do, because I think we did a show on it at the time. Yes, of course I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, they became known as the Whole Truth 5, and there was a very good reason for that. That was because they were prevented in their evidence from telling the whole truth. You know, the oath that we take to give the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Yeah. They were not allowed to give the whole truth. The jury in that trial was not allowed to hear the whole truth. And we see exactly the same thing happening with our government. I totally agree with your last call. I was listening with interest and support because, it's the first duty of our government, right, is to keep citizens safe. And as your caller said, we have already passed the safety limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yeah. And unless and until we stop the burning of fossil fuels, we will reach over 3 degrees of warming. And that literally means, and it's not just me saying this, that means billions of people will be killed and ordered civil society will collapse because large parts of the world will become unable to support life. Now, our government is not giving us the whole truth. They need to get on with the job. They need to tell us how serious it is, and they need to let ordinary people, like you and me, decide what to do through a process, something like a citizens' assembly, where we're given the facts and we can come up with, sort of common sense and cost-effective measures like increasing renewables, making public transport affordable or even free, and just all those sensible things. And at the moment, that is not happening because, to repeat, we are not being given the whole truth.
Well, thank you very much for calling, and I can confirm what Sue said. So Lord Walney is known as John Woodcock, and his entries in the Lord's Register of Interest show he is paid to act as the chair of the Purpose Business Coalition, which is an organisation run by the PR and lobbying firm Crown Associates, which counts the oil company BP and the arms company Leonardo among its clients. That's what that says. Pretty much what Sue said. So thank you very much for ringing. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. Thanks for all your calls and messages on Just Stop Oil.